All right, my beautiful friends, welcome back to All Cars Reacts, and today we are going to be continuing our mini-series on the mid to late 2000s, kind of compact luxury-ish cars. I'm cheating a little bit here today because we're going to be doing the 2009 Hyundai Genesis. Now, this is not actually the one I sat down to record while I was in the shower this morning thinking about what was next and my thoughts on it. I apparently forgot how the alphabet works, and it was not this car, but luckily I made a list and alphabetized it before. So we're going to do this one real quick and see what we think about it. You and I are two old friends. We're going to sit back in our comfy chairs, non-sponsored comfy chairs, laugh about this, drink a beverage. We've got some decaf here this morning, and it's still hot. So let's get into it and see what Motorweek said when the Genesis was new.
Nearly 50 years for Japanese brands to be permanently rooted in America. If there's one thing to be said about Korean automaker Hyundai, it is that they are impatient. While it took nearly 50 years for Japanese brands to be permanently rooted in America with domestic plants, a diverse range of products, and large market share, Hyundai is doing it in half the time. And their latest salvo takes on the big guns of the global luxury market with the Genesis. It's a rear-drive four-door that is also impatient for success. Hyundai expects their 2009 Genesis flagship sedan to be a true breakout product, changing their image from a mass marketer to a premium brand and paving the way for the Genesis Coupe and other luxury sport models to come. The world first laid eyes on this BMW 5 Series pretender at the 2007 New York Auto Show. Initial impressions were of a substantial four-door with graceful lines and reflection pool-like surfaces. In production form, the large chrome grille with no Hyundai H anywhere to be found is bordered by jeweled lamp clusters with optional auto-leveling HID headlights. The Genesis profile also speaks premium with a finely sculpted shape from stem to stern that's brightened with splashes of chrome, while the back end continues the premium theme adorned with wraparound LED tail lamps and shiny dual exhaust pipes.
All right, let's talk about this styling. And the first thing I'm going to say is, you know why I said I'm kind of cheating on this one. You know, we've been doing the Audi A4, the 3 Series, things of that size. This is a size up. They said this is a 5 Series competitor. Genesis didn't really have something in the 3 Series category, but I wanted to include this car. So I'm going to be a little fair when we talk about acceleration, braking, handling, things like that. I recognize this is a class up, but I'm also not planning on doing the 5 Series, the E-Class, and everything else. I may later, but I'm not planning on doing it at this point. But I wanted to talk about this car because I think this car looks really, really good. I have said it many times. I'm amazed at the progress that Hyundai has made in a relatively short amount of time, and their approach to building out Genesis was not what Toyota and Honda and Nissan did, of just boom, here's a new luxury brand. They edged their way up to it and then broke it off. That is to their disadvantage because Hyundai dealers had the Genesis, but now they have Genesis. And it is part of what's holding back the Genesis brand. I believe that firmly. Is this as beautiful as, say, the Audis or the BMWs or, you know, maybe, well, no, not the Acura. Okay, I think this is a absolute amazing achievement by Hyundai. It looks substantial. It has a presence. It doesn't quite exude the visual refinement that maybe the BMW or a Mercedes or an Audi or some other brands have, but it doesn't look cartoonish either. To me, when I see this generation of Genesis, I do think that's a person who either could not or would not pay the money for one of the German brands. And they were willing to settle for 9/10 or 95% out of 100 of what the German brands offer because they got a price discount. It's not great value, Mercedes, right? But it is. It didn't do, when it was released, it didn't do to the market what the Lexus LS did. Okay, this was a follower. But you can't fault somebody for liking this from a styling perspective right now. I think it looks fantastic. Is it my number one most beautiful car that we are going to talk about? No, but it's absolutely not at the bottom. And I think we're going to see on the interior, this was an awesome car to spend some time in. And I would like to say, if I go forward here, it's fuzzy, but in a profile, the tail lights, their treatment on the side here, 5 Series all the way. This is a good looking car. I know it sounds like I'm killing it with faint praise. This is a good looking car. And I'd like to add, surprisingly reserved. You know, you see a lot of, I'm going to say Chinese, but just generally Asian cars. They tend to get blinged up a lot. And it would have been very easy for Hyundai to make more luxury by adding more chrome, more flash. And they didn't. This is surprisingly reserved. Their stylists looked at what Germans were doing and were very reserved in the amount of bright work they put on the car. Just enough so that there's maybe just a little sparkle out there. It's not in your face like, you know, maybe an old Cadillac is a good example. Really, really good looking car.
Inside, the Genesis also shines with fit finish and soft touch materials that are equal to or better than European rivals. The artful dash unites flowing lines with leather, aluminum, and wood trim. Gauges stand out, while controls express a higher-end guise. The standard leather heated seats are comfy and supportive, with power adjust for both driver and passenger. The V8's music pours from a standard 11-speaker Lexicon sound system, the brand also used in the Rolls-Royce Phantom. And with 8 standard airbags and electronic active head restraints, front and side 5-star safety ratings were assured. The wide rear seat makes room for 3 and has its own climate controls. There's a chunky cup holder armrest which hides a small trunk pass-through. The trunk itself is large, measuring in at 15.9 cubic feet. Under the hood,
and you know that's one of the places many of the other ones we've been talking about. You know, the trunk is 12 cubic feet, 12.5 cubic feet. This is a bigger car, so that's a big trunk. And generally there's no problem with this interior. I love, Infiniti did this for a while. I love when you've got controls up on the dash like that, but you angle them down or angle them out so it's not more flat. I don't love the shape they're using. I don't love that either aluminum or, you know, shiny plastic around where the radio and the vents are, and all of those buttons being, you know, that shiny material. And then all of a sudden you've got what looks like it tilts backwards, where I think that's the CD right underneath it. It's stylish, it's good looking, but in an effort to be not quite as Germanically rectilinear, they've come up with some more organic shapes that are a little awkward to me. I don't love them. But the steering wheel, the gauges, the top part of the dash, the rest of it, the wood here, there's no problem except for my personal preferences in shapes and materials. This is a good looking interior. And I want to say the back seat was really, really large, and very, very comfortable. If this wasn't a home run, This was a solid triple, honestly. This was a really comfortable, well put together, and a general sense of quality. I would argue that the interior materials on this generation of Genesis, they don't hold up as well as what you're going to get in maybe the German cars, but there was no real sense of cost cutting in the materials, right? It was good. It was really, really good. So let's move on. They're going to talk about the engine next.
Feet. Under the hood, the rear-drive Genesis defines its luxury with two variable valve timing engines. There's a familiar 3.8-liter V6 with 290 horsepower and 264 pound-feet of torque. Or there's Hyundai's new TAO 4.6-liter V8, their first 8-cylinder for the U.S. It generates a brawny 375 horses and 333 pound-feet of torque. That's more horsepower but slightly less torque than 8s found in the Lexus GS and the Infiniti M. Both engines made to a 6-speed automatic transmission with manual shift mode. Our test.
No real problems with the engines. Now, I think that some people may say these engines are a little troublesome or not as good as what other manufacturers are doing. I try not to talk about reliability of engines because honestly, I find people have differing opinions. I only talk about it with CVT transmissions, but those are solid numbers. The smaller one, again, I'm comparing this with the more compact, right, cars like the 3 Series, but that smaller engine, 290 horsepower, roundly kills the 3.3-liter 6 from BMW. Not a huge surprise, but these engines felt substantial. Maybe that's the way. The power felt substantial. I think that contemporary comparison tests would show that these engines are competent, but not exactly class leading, in spite of what the numbers say. This is not a sports sedan quite in the same way that a 5 Series or even that Infiniti M they mentioned. I have no problem with the powertrains. That's what I'm trying to say, guys.
V8 yielded government fuel economy ratings of 17 city, 25 highway. We drove 21 miles per gallon on premium gas. Genesis V8 energy impact score is a high 18 barrels of oil consumed per year, while its carbon footprint measures 9.6 annual tons of CO2 emitted.
Before they get to the track, let's just talk about that EPA number real quick. 17, 25 with 21 overall. Yeah, there's part of me that wants to knee-jerk reaction and say, well, that sounds kind of low. That 17 really jumps out at me, right? Acura TL Type S, admittedly, okay? But Honda, they're known for their efficient and smooth engines. Where to go? 20, 29, but 22 in mixed driving. So the TL, smaller, V6, less power, only 1 mile per gallon better than what this thing does. I will admit to complete shock at that result. If you told me this got 19, I'd believe it.
On the track, our V8 Genesis was a delightful surprise, charging from 0 to 60 in a fast 5.8 seconds and sprinting the quarter mile in 14.3 seconds at 103 miles per hour. The V8 maintains a strong build throughout the run. Shifts are smooth, well-spaced, and fall right in the heart of the power band. In terms of driving dynamics, the Genesis sports a nearly perfectly balanced chassis with standard stability and traction control. The sophisticated suspension is defined by 5 link geometries in the front and back. Through the twisties, Genesis is far more agile than many large sedans. Relatively soft springs allow modest body roll, but turn-ins are quick. Steering is fast, if a little light, and the rear end is just loose enough to be fun. The result is a well-mannered handler, maybe not in BMW's league yet, but certainly competitive with other Asian luxury rivals. Stopping power comes from four-wheel disc brakes with brake assist. Stops were stable and fade-free, averaging a fine 126 feet from 60 to 0. There was, however, a goodly amount of nosedive.
That's kind of a wow. The 0 to 60 time, again, I'm trying to be careful here. This is a different size, different class with a V8, but the BMW, the 3.3 liter V6 with a manual transmission, 0 to 60 in 6.1. This is faster. So it's a bigger car with a bigger engine, but it's faster. You know, basically the TL Type S is about the same, 0 to 60. That's pretty impressive, actually. And through the slalom, I will admit it looked better than I expected it to. It did not look BMW-ish. And they even kind of mentioned that. It's not in the same class yet as BMW. They said the rear end made it fun, but it looked a little loosey-goosey, especially that last section from the rear when they went through the slalom. The rear end actually did this, right? Let's look at that again.
Not in BMW's league yet, but certainly competitive with other Asian luxury rivals.
You know, I think this is a car that's definitely more comfort, road travel, highway, not sports sedan. And that's okay. You know, you think about Mercedes or the Lincolns and, you know, things like that, that you want it to handle competently. And I think that chasing the sharpest reflexes is a race to the bottom. I really do. You want a car that handles competently. The only people who really care if you've got the absolute best handling in the world and you can brag about it are either somebody who's autocrossing their car or, you know, driving terribly unsafe on public roads. I'm hedging my bet here because I don't love the handling. It looks squirrely to me. But I keep coming back to the executive who's going to drive this car. Are they ever going to approach the point where that rear end gets a little squirrely? And I don't think so. Stopping. It's basically the same as everybody else. In fact, it's shorter. In fact, looking at it now, it's shorter than the Audi, Acura, and the BMW 3 Series. Only by, you know, a couple, 3 feet, but still a solid job. This is impressive. It really is. I feel like I'm hedging my bets a lot, but I'm impressed.
3.8 starts at $33,000, while the Genesis 4.6 begins at $38,000. That's over $10,000 under rivals and includes a 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. The 2009 Genesis is a...
Let's talk about those prices real quick. Basically, you can get this car for the same price as, it's unbelievable, the same price as an Audi or a BMW, which is a much smaller car. Is this better looking than the Audi? I don't think so. Is it a better handler than the BMW? I don't think so. Is it a better value? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what Americans like, right? I can get a bigger size for the same money. Generally speaking, the same money. No brainer.
Terrific effort by Hyundai to make a splash in the luxury segment, and no less impressive than Lexus and Infiniti with their first models. Still, we know that some buyers will be unable to see past its Hyundai badging, no matter how discreetly it's used. But as impatient as Hyundai is, we're also sure that any stumbling blocks encountered by Genesis will be quickly swept away. Well,
I am willing to bet the depreciation on this car was astonishing because of that Hyundai badging. And, you know, Hyundai Genesis is such a success story. At the same time, they're kind of a failure. And I say that with all the respect in the world, because the idea of the large, what would be called in Europe, the executive car, really fell away. When people wanted to buy a large car loaded with luxury and technology and features, they also wanted the name associated with it. I think about I think it was the Citroën C6, one of the most beautiful cars ever made. It's one of it is probably my top most beautiful car ever made, but it didn't sell very well. And part of it was because it had the more pedestrian name on it, not BMW, Mercedes, Audi, something like that. So Hyundai actually started Genesis as just the flagship and then broke it off separately. And I think it's generally held back. So their success in making very well reviewed and modestly good selling SUVs and cars is a success by itself. But I think they could have been even more successful if they hadn't started with the training wheels on and just introduced it as a model, if you know what I mean. And when I talk about cars that I say things like, it's like they didn't put any effort in, right? And I'm going to give an example here, the Lincoln MKZ. We're going to be doing that in several days. And I think it's a nice car. I think it looks good. I think the interior is nice. I think it's probably perfectly fine. But really, Ford just took a platform and let's make a Lincoln out of it. Here, Hyundai put in the effort, right? They created this platform. They went right at the best in the world. Now, are they better than the BMW, the Mercedes, the Audi, whatever else out there? By some metrics. But they offer real value for the money and a great warranty along the way. And it handles good. And it's got a powerful engine. And it got very competitive gas mileage. And this is what I'm talking about when I say a manufacturer putting in the effort. Would I like them to do just a tiny bit more, especially like the grille? I didn't love the grille, but it's fine. You know, I'm not going to harp on it too much. This is a car, this is a manufacturer that put in the effort, and it shows. They could have maybe picked another platform and just kind of stretched it out a little bit and, you know, made it as nice as they could, but been hampered by it. See also the Lincoln Continental, but Hyundai didn't do it. They put in the effort. I respect them for that. I absolutely do. And this is a great car from that perspective. Yes, I have looked at these. I have driven these. I have thought, I depending on the day, there's a day where I'm like, Hyundai is the way to go. If you can get close to, you know, again, 95 percentile of what I'm going to get with a BMW or Mercedes without paying the BMW, Mercedes, Audi name tax, and in a car that I think looks good and is comfortable, and I'd be thrilled to drive this car for a long time. Yeah, I've thought about it multiple times, but the next day I'm like, you know, if I'm going to spend that kind of money, why not stretch and have the name too? Fantastic car. Love this car. I think it's a great car. I don't know that it would be my number one choice, but if we were to flip the script and we were looking at used, lightly used, 3 years, just off a lease, ooh, this would be a strong contender. Thanks so much for being here, y'all. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me today.